By the time the Whitmore sisters organized their safety committee to destroy my farm, I already owned the original road easement, had recordings of their bribery attempts, and knew exactly where their million-dollar houses were illegally built. But let me back up to that Tuesday morning when this whole beautiful disaster started. I'm standing in my driveway, watching Veronica Whitmore gun her pristine $60,000 0-cents BMW straight through my organic herb garden for the third time this week. The sickening crunch of crushed basil under her luxury tires, the acrid smell of exhaust choking my morning air. 3 months of back-breaking work destroyed in seconds. She rolls down her window, flashes me that entitled suburban smirk, and delivers the line that would haunt her for months. Public road, honey. And her sister Beatrice follows in her Range Rover, deliberately swerving to crush more plants, just for fun. What they didn't know was that I'd been documenting every crime, recording every threat, and building the case that would end their suburban paradise forever. What would you do if someone was destroying your livelihood just to save 5 minutes on their commute? Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I bet you've got your own Karen stories. Let me back up and tell you how I ended up in this mess. My name's Ezra Dalton, and 3 years ago, I inherited my grandfather's 40-acre farm in rural Virginia. After spending 8 years in the Army Corps of Engineers, where I learned that every problem has a solution if you're patient enough to find the right pressure point, the idea of growing something instead of blowing things up sounded pretty appealing. I converted the whole operation to organic herbs and vegetables. Turns out, precision and attention to detail, skills the Army drilled into me while I was building bridges under sniper fire, translate pretty well to farming. The restaurants in town couldn't get enough of my basil that actually tasted like basil, not like the cardboard they were getting from industrial farms. Every morning, I'd walk through rows of perfect tomato plants, breathing in that green, earthy smell of healthy soil mixed with morning dew, the satisfying crunch of gravel under my boots as I made my rounds, the gentle vibration of my grandfather's old Massey Ferguson humming through the pre-dawn silence. It was exactly the kind of methodical, peaceful work I'd dreamed about in those desert foxholes, where the only smells were diesel fuel and fear. Then Meadowbrook Estates happened, and my quiet sanctuary turned into suburban hell. Some developer called Pinnacle Properties bought the farmland next to mine and slapped down 40 identical houses, each one more beige than the last. And here's the kicker, they needed road access to the main highway. My property sits smack between their little suburban paradise and civilization. There's a farm access road running along my property line that's been there since Eisenhower was president. Built for tractors and hay wagons, not Karen's morning latte run. But somebody in that subdivision, and I think you can guess who, figured out they could shave 8 precious minutes off their commute by treating my farm like their personal interstate. Enter the Whitmore sisters, Veronica and Beatrice, aka Tweedledum and Tweedledummer. Veronica's 45, drives her white BMW like she's qualifying for NASCAR, and sells real estate with the kind of predatory smile that makes used car salesmen look trustworthy. She's got that blonde suburban mom haircut that screams, "I demand to speak to your manager," and nails so sharp they could probably cut glass. Her husband Dale sits on the city council, which basically means he rubber stamps whatever makes his wife's friends richer. Beatrice is the younger sister at 42. Rocks a Range Rover that's never seen anything more rugged than a Whole Foods parking lot, and works as an insurance adjuster. If you've ever wondered what kind of person makes a living finding reasons to deny people's claims after their house burns down, now you know. Both live in identical McMansions that probably cost more than most people make in 5 years. Both sit on the HOA board like it's the Supreme Court, and both have made it their personal crusade to complain about every single thing my farm does. My tractor's too loud at 7 a.m. Apparently growing food should happen on their schedule. My equipment creates too much dust. Shocking, I know. My farm vehicles are unsightly when parked on my own damn property. The first time I noticed tire tracks cutting through my herb garden, I figured some GPS-confused tourist had made a wrong turn. But my security camera told a different story. There were the Whitmore sisters, bold as brass, using my property as their personal highway. Being the reasonable guy my grandfather raised me to be, I walked over to Veronica's house and politely explained that their shortcut was destroying $200 0-cents worth of crops every week. Her response? She actually laughed. Not a polite chuckle, but a full-on cackle while examining her blood-red manicure. "Honey," she purred, "that's a public road. Maybe look up prescriptive easement if you don't understand property law. Beatrice materialized beside her like a bad omen, arms crossed, adding, "Farms like this are so outdated anyway. This is 2025, not 1925. Time to modernize." I tried explaining about soil compaction, destroyed plants, the difference between agricultural and residential traffic. Veronica just shrugged those bony shoulders and delivered the line that would haunt my dreams. "Sounds like a you problem, farmer boy." That's when I knew this wasn't going to end with polite conversation. Within a week, what started as an occasional shortcut turned into a full-blown invasion. The sisters were cutting through twice daily during rush hour, and they'd recruited half their subdivision. I'm talking about a regular parade of luxury vehicles, BMWs, Mercedes, even a damn Tesla, treating my farm access road like it was their personal interstate highway. I put up polite signs, "Please respect farm property," and "agricultural vehicles only." You know what happened to those signs? Someone took a can of bright red spray paint and wrote "public road" across every single one, then threw them in my irrigation ditch for good measure. Real classy. But Veronica decided that basic vandalism wasn't enough. Time to bring in the government. She filed a formal complaint with the county, claiming my farm created unsafe driving conditions. According to her 3-page typed manifesto, my property was a menace to public safety because of dust from farming operations, slow-moving tractors that impede traffic flow, and, this is my personal favorite, my aggressive and potentially rabid farm dogs. For the record, I have exactly one dog, a border collie named Ranger who's about as aggressive as a therapy puppy and once got scared by a particularly loud chicken. The only thing he's ever attacked is his own tail. The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday, and I could practically smell the bureaucratic bullshit wafting off the official county letterhead. But Veronica had connections. Her husband Dale was already working his city council magic, pressuring County Inspector Bradley Morrison to fast-track an emergency investigation. Now, most people might panic when they get an official government complaint, but 8 years of military service teaches you something valuable. When someone declares war on you, the first thing you do is gather intelligence and fortify your position. I spent that entire weekend at the courthouse, digging through dusty property records like I was planning a strategic mission. My fingers were black with old ink, and the musty smell of decades-old documents filled my nostrils as I traced ownership back to the 1948. And wouldn't you know it, I struck pure gold. The original 1962 deed for that access road came with a very specific covenant, granted for agricultural vehicle access only in perpetuity, not public road, not residential convenience, agricultural vehicles only, forever and always. And here's your knowledge nugget. Historical deed restrictions almost always override modern zoning laws and neighborhood complaints. Always check the original property covenants at your county courthouse. They're public record and might just be the legal ammunition you need. I also upgraded my security system that week. We're talking military-grade cameras with night vision, motion sensors, and atomic clock timestamps that would hold up in any courtroom. Because if the Army taught me anything, it's that proper documentation wins more battles than big guns. The mini twist came 2 weeks later, and it was a doozy. I'm out harvesting tomatoes when this white county inspection van pulls up, kicking up a cloud of dust that made me sneeze. Out steps Inspector Morrison, a tired-looking guy in his 50s who clearly didn't want to be there. Normal inspection, right? Wrong. 5 minutes later, here come Veronica and Beatrice in their matching luxury SUVs, followed by a white sedan I didn't recognize. 3 vehicles, all arriving at the exact same time my surprise inspection was happening. "Oh my goodness," Veronica announced, stepping out in designer heels that sank into my soft soil. "We were just driving by and saw the county inspector. Is everything okay here, Mr. Dalton?" Just driving by, through my private agricultural road, with a mysterious third car. What a cosmic coincidence. But here's where it got interesting. The guy in the white sedan turned out to be Veronica's brother-in-law, a city planning official who had absolutely no jurisdiction on county agricultural matters. This wasn't just an inspection, it was an ambush. Inspector Morrison looked more uncomfortable by the minute as the 3 officials huddled together, whispering and pointing at my equipment. I could hear fragments, outdated permits, residential compatibility, public safety concerns. They found exactly one violation. My farm stand permit was 6 months expired. technically illegal but about as serious as jaywalking. Beatrice pulled out her phone and started live streaming to Facebook. "Documenting unsafe farming practices in our neighborhood," she announced to her camera. "The residents of Meadowbrook Estates deserve better." That's when I played my trump card. I walked over with a thick manila folder and calmly handed Inspector Morrison copies of the original 1962 deed covenant, agricultural exemption laws, and a detailed log of every unauthorized vehicle that had trespassed on my property, complete with license plates, timestamps, and estimated crop damage. "Gentlemen," I said, my voice steady as a rock, "this road has been legally restricted to agricultural use since the Kennedy administration. I'd be happy to explain why these unauthorized vehicles constitute criminal trespassing." The planning official's face went white. Inspector Morrison flipped through my documentation, his eyebrows climbing higher with each page. The crisp sound of papers rustling was the only noise as reality set in. "Mr. Dalton," Morrison finally said, "your permit violation is minor. 30 days to renew should be sufficient." He looked directly at Veronica. "However, these deed restrictions are ironclad. This is definitely a private property matter." As they drove away. Still using my road, naturally. I watched Veronica gesturing frantically through her BMW's windshield, probably already planning her next assault. But I wasn't worried anymore. For the first time since this war began, I had them right where I wanted them. You'd think getting shut down by a county inspector might humble the Whitmore sisters. You'd be dead wrong. Instead of backing off, they doubled down like drunk Vegas gamblers. Within a week, what had been a two-car problem became a full-scale suburban invasion. Now I had 6 to 8 vehicles cutting through my farm every rush hour. BMWs, Mercedes, Range Rovers, and even a bright yellow Hummer that looked like a school bus had mated with a tank. The morning symphony of my peaceful farm, birds chirping, wind rustling through corn stalks, had been replaced by the aggressive rumble of luxury engines and the screech of brakes as entitled suburbanites took the turn through my herb garden at highway speeds. The smell of exhaust fumes was so thick some mornings that my chickens started coughing. But here's where Beatrice really showed her true colors. She'd appointed herself as the neighborhood's amateur Steven Spielberg, recording every interaction with her iPhone like she was making Blackfish, but for farmers. According to her daily Facebook live streams, I was stalking and harassing innocent residents by monitoring my own property. She even started a hashtag, Farmers Gone Wild. Real creative. I decided it was time to fight emotion with cold, hard data. I installed a professional pneumatic traffic counter, the kind highway departments use to track vehicle flow. Cost me $200, 0 cents, but worth every penny to have scientific evidence instead of my increasingly colorful vocabulary. The rubber tube stretched across my access road with a satisfying thunk every time a tire hit it. The results were staggering. 47 unauthorized vehicles in 1 week. On a road designed for maybe 3 tractors per day, I was getting more traffic than some city streets. Now, Virginia law is beautifully clear about trespassing damages. Every unauthorized vehicle crossing private property can be charged $10, 0 cents per incident per day. Basic multiplication, 47 vehicles, X $10, X cents, X 7 days equals $3,290, 0 cents per week in documented damages. Here's your knowledge nugget. Small claims court can handle property damage up to $5,000, 0 cents per incident without requiring expensive lawyers. Document everything with timestamps, and you can take trespassers to court for the cost of a filing fee. I spent that weekend crafting certified letters to every license plate I documented. Professional letterhead, legal citations, photos of their vehicles destroying my crops. Total amount requested, $3,290, 0 cents. Payable within 30 days or face small claims court action. The mini twist came 3 days later, and it was better than Christmas morning. I'm elbow deep in irrigation repairs, mud caked under my fingernails, when my phone rings. Unknown number, but something told me to answer. "Mr. Dalton, this is Dale Whitmore. We need to talk. Now." Veronica's husband, the city councilman, and he sounded scared. Now, most people don't know this, but Virginia is a one-party consent state for recording phone calls. Military paranoia pays off sometimes. My phone was already configured to record everything automatically. "Sure, Dale. What's on your mind?" Look, there's been a misunderstanding about this road situation. I think we can work something out that benefits everyone. The sound of his nervous throat clearing came through crystal clear on my recording app. I'm listening. What if I told you there were development opportunities for your property? Very lucrative ones. Agricultural to mixed-use residential rezoning. You could be looking at 7 figures easy. I let the silence stretch, listening to his increasingly panicked breathing. Are you offering to buy my farm, Dale? Not buy, exactly. More like partner with you. If you were cooperative about the road access, certain zoning changes might move through the approval process more smoothly. And if I'm not cooperative? The pause was so long I thought he'd hung up. When he finally spoke, his voice had dropped to a whisper that my microphone barely caught. County tax assessments get reviewed every few years, Ezra. Agricultural exemptions aren't guaranteed forever. Sometimes properties get reassessed at full market value, could turn a $2,000 0-cent annual tax bill into $25,000 0 cents overnight. Real shame when farmers can't afford their own land anymore. There it was. Extortion, delivered by an elected official who probably thought intimidating one veteran farmer would be easier than explaining to his wife why her precious shortcut was illegal. Interesting perspective, Dale. Anything else? Just think about what's best for everyone involved. There are easy ways and hard ways to handle neighborhood disputes. He hung up so fast I could practically hear the click echoing in his mansion. I sat there in my muddy work clothes, listening to the recording playback, and started laughing, because Dale Whitmore had just handed me enough evidence to end his political career and possibly send him to prison. The community was starting to choose sides. Restaurant owners who bought my organic produce rallied behind me. They understood that losing local farms meant losing their farm-to-table authenticity. But newer suburban residents were buying into Veronica's narrative about modernizing rural areas. The local paper ran a piece about changing demographics and land use conflicts, which was polite journalism for rich people think they own everything. Meanwhile, Veronica was busy playing victim on social media, posting tearful selfies with captions about rural sexism and being targeted for success, because apparently criminal trespassing becomes social justice when you drive a BMW. But as I sat on my porch that evening, listening to my recording of Dale's threats and watching luxury headlights cut through my property line, I realized something beautiful. They'd just declared war on someone who actually knew how to fight one. Having a city councilman's recorded confession of bribery and extortion in your back pocket should have ended this war. But if you think that stopped the Whitmore sisters, you clearly don't understand the psychology of entitled suburbanites who mistake their HOA presidency for actual political power. Instead of retreating, they decided to go full-scale military operation. Within 2 weeks, a shiny new organization materialized out of thin air, the Meadowbrook Estates Safety Committee. Veronica appointed herself chairwoman, Beatrice became community outreach coordinator, and they recruited a board that read like a who's who of local real estate agents and insurance brokers. Their mission statement, printed on letterhead so expensive it probably cost more than my seed budget, was to protect residential families from hazardous agricultural operations. The stench of manufactured outrage was thick enough to choke a horse. Their first official act was petitioning the county to declare my farm road a public safety hazard. They'd somehow convinced 12 neighbors to sign affidavits claiming my farming activities created everything from traffic dangers to environmental contamination to decreased property values. Some of these people lived 3 subdivisions away and had probably never seen a tractor outside of a John Deere commercial. Meanwhile, Beatrice was working her insurance connections like a mob boss calling in favors. Suddenly, my liability carrier was bombarding me with questions about increased public exposure and unauthorized traffic patterns. Funny how insurance companies develop concerns when a professional claims adjuster starts making unofficial phone calls to former colleagues during her wine-soaked book club meetings. I decided it was time to fight their fancy presentations with actual science. Dr. Sarah Martinez from the Agricultural Extension Office cost me $500 0 cents for a professional soil impact assessment, but her report read like a legal weapon. Unauthorized vehicle traffic has caused soil compaction equivalent to 5 years of normal wear, reducing crop yield by 18% and requiring $3,000 in remediation efforts. The crunch of her soil core sampler penetrating my damaged earth sounded like a judge's gavel condemning their trespassing. I also hired Thompson Surveying for GPS-precise property documentation. Another $400, but now I had legal-grade proof that the sisters had been trespassing by 47 feet on every single trip. That's not a mistake. That's deliberate, systematic property theft. The security system got a military-grade upgrade: facial recognition cameras, automatic license plate readers, motion-activated floodlights, and cloud storage that would make the Pentagon jealous. Every trespasser was now being documented with the precision of a criminal investigation, because that's exactly what this had become. The mini twists came when they orchestrated their public hearing, and it was like watching a Broadway production of How to Steal a Farm. The county meeting room was packed wall to wall with people I'd never seen before. Perfectly groomed suburban warriors carrying professionally printed signs reading "Modernize Rural Infrastructure" and "Children's Safety First." The air reeked of expensive perfume and the kind of self-righteous indignation that only comes from people who've never worked with their hands. Veronica had clearly imported an audience because I recognized maybe 4 faces out of 50 attendees. The rest looked like they'd been recruited from a country club casting call. Beatrice opened with a PowerPoint presentation that would have impressed Microsoft executives. Pie charts, traffic flow animations, even a 3D model of the road intersection. She'd probably spent more on graphics design than I made in 3 months. Agricultural operations, she declared, clicking to a slide showing a mangled car wreck from some unrelated accident, must evolve with community growth. We cannot allow outdated farming practices to endanger modern families. The crowd murmured agreement like a trained chorus. Veronica followed with a parade of concerned residents who testified that my farm equipment created unsafe conditions. One perfectly coiffed woman actually claimed my tractor had aggressively followed her BMW for 2 miles because apparently a machine that tops out at 15 FF is capable of vehicular stalking. But here's what made me smile. I was photographing every face, recording every license plate, documenting every speaker, because while they were performing theater, I was conducting reconnaissance. When County Commissioner Janet Powell asked if I wanted to respond, I stood up slowly, my boots echoing in the suddenly quiet room. Thank you, Commissioner Powell. I appreciate everyone's passionate testimony tonight. I'll be filing my formal response through proper legal channels within 48 hours. The silence was beautiful. They had expected anger, shouting, the stereotypical hot-headed farmer having a meltdown. Instead, I gave them nothing but professional courtesy and the kind of cold smile that comes from holding all the winning cards. Veronica's perfectly Botoxed face couldn't hide her confusion. Beatrice looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. That night, I ran those license plates through public records. 3 concerned local residents lived in other counties. One was from freaking Maryland. They'd literally imported fake witnesses to lie at a government hearing. But the real jackpot came when I researched Pinnacle Properties' history. Same pattern in 4 other counties. Build subdivision, manufacture road disputes, pressure farmers to sell cheap. This wasn't personal harassment. It was a corporate land grab with a proven business model. As I sat on my porch that evening, breathing in the sweet scent of night-blooming jasmine and listening to my grandfather's wind chimes, I realized something beautiful. They'd just handed me everything I needed to destroy them. The metallic taste of anticipation filled my mouth as I planned their downfall. Sometimes the universe hands you exactly what you need when you're least expecting it. For me, that moment came on a drizzly Thursday morning when my surveyor called with the kind of excitement usually reserved for lottery winners. "Ezra, drop everything and get down here. I just found the smoking gun." Thompson had been doing routine follow-up measurements when his metal detector started screaming like a banshee. What he'd unearthed from beneath 2 feet of mud and 40 years of neglect was better than pirate treasure. The original 1958 concrete survey markers defining the true county road easement. The acrid smell of rusted rebar and decades-old concrete dust filled my nostrils as we carefully excavated the markers. But when Thompson spread out a yellowed blueprint he discovered buried in the county archives, my hands literally started shaking. "Look at this fine print," he said, pointing to handwritten notes and faded blue ink along the margin. I squinted at the barely legible scrawl. Road easement granted to county for agricultural vehicle access only, in perpetuity. Any modification or expansion of use requires unanimous written consent of all adjoining agricultural property owners. Let me break that down for you in plain English. I had legal veto power over any changes to that road, not the city council, not the planning commission, not the almighty Whitmore sisters, me. But Thompson wasn't done dropping bombshells. There's more, he said, unrolling a second set of blueprints. When Pinnacle Properties built Meadowbrook Estates, they made a very expensive mistake. The construction survey showed 3 houses, including both Whitmore properties, with foundations extending 8 to 12 feet into the county road right-of-ways. We're talking about permanent structures built on public land without permission, lease, or legal right. How the hell did this get approved? I asked, though my military training was already connecting the dots. Sloppy surveying and somebody getting paid to look the other way, Thompson said grimly. The county inspector who signed off on these violations was Dale Whitmore's golf buddy, retired to a beach house in Florida the day after final approval. The beautiful irony hit me like a lightning bolt. The sisters weren't just trespassing on my farm, they were literally living in houses built on stolen county land. And if the road reverted to agricultural-only use, those illegally constructed homes would lose their legal access entirely. Their million-dollar properties would become million-dollar monuments to suburban stupidity. I spent the next week in full reconnaissance mode, gathering intelligence like I was planning a military operation. County Clerk Janet Reeves, a sweet grandmother who'd worked there since the Carter administration, became my unwitting ally in documenting 30 years of bureaucratic corruption. "Oh my," she whispered, her weathered hands trembling as we photocopied permit violations. "This is fraud, plain and simple. I always wondered how those inspections got rushed through so fast." The paper trail was damning. Original building permits showed houses ending exactly at the property line. Actual construction, accidentally, exceeded approved boundaries by hundreds of square feet. The inspector who rubber-stamped these violations retired immediately after a mysteriously expensive beachfront condo that his county salary could never have afforded. But here's where my engineer brain started calculating pure revenge. Virginia law allows counties to charge market rate rent for any structures built on public right-of-ways, retroactive to construction date. Time houses, 18 months of a legal occupation, prime real estate rental rates. The backprint alone totaled $187,000, 0 cents. As I drove home through the purple twilight, my truck's diesel engine purring with satisfaction, the weight of my discovery settled in my chest like warm honey. The cool evening air carried the scent of my thriving herb garden through the open windows, basil and rosemary that would never again be crushed under the tires of entitled trespassers. I wasn't defending my farm anymore. I was holding the deed to their destruction. The sisters had spent months trying to force me off my land, never realizing they were living in glass houses built on quicksand. Their suburban paradise was one legal filing away from becoming the most expensive real estate disaster in county history. The sweet metallic taste of victory was already coating my tongue. Knowledge without a plan is just expensive trivia, and brother, I was about to turn my newfound intelligence into a symphony of legal destruction. The first call I made was to Miranda Santos, an agricultural lawyer from Richmond who'd built her reputation destroying corporate land grabs. When I explained my situation over the phone, her laugh sounded like a predator scenting wounded prey. "Ezra, this is the kind of case that pays for my daughter's college tuition. When can you get up here?" The 2-hour drive to Richmond felt like traveling to Mission Command. Walking into Miranda's office, legal books towering like fortress walls, conference table already covered with Virginia property statutes and yellow legal pads. I could smell victory, mixing with the leather scent of old law books. "Let's talk warfare," she said, spreading my evidence across the mahogany table like a general planning D-Day. "What you've discovered isn't just property violation, it's organized fraud involving elected officials." Miranda explained the legal landscape with surgical precision. The 1958 easement restriction was legally bulletproof. No court in America would override agricultural protections that old. The construction violations were criminal felonies, not civil disputes. And Dale's recorded bribery? That was a one-way ticket to federal prison. Here's your knowledge nugget, she said, stabbing her Mont Blanc pen at a thick statute book. Pre-1980 agricultural easements are constitutionally protected from modification. Even through eminent domain, the Founding Fathers specifically wanted to protect farmers from government overreach. But Miranda wasn't thinking defense. She was orchestrating a legal blitzkrieg that would make the sisters wish they'd never heard of shortcuts. Back home, I convened my war council around my grandmother's oak kitchen table, the aroma of strong coffee mingled with evening air carrying the scent of honeysuckle through open windows as my unlikely army assembled. Tommy Morgan arrived first, carrying financial artillery. 12 restaurant owners are ready to testify about local agriculture's economic impact, he said, spreading out profit and loss statements. We're talking $2,300,000, 0 cents annually from farm-to-table operations. Losing local farms means losing authentic cuisine, which means losing tourist dollars. Janet Reeves shuffled in with a banker's box that looked like it weighed more than she did. 40 years of county records, she announced, with the satisfaction of a librarian who just solved a decades-old mystery. Every suspicious permit, every rushed inspection, every golf game between Dale Whitmore and his inspector buddy. Marcus Williams, my army buddy turned construction mogul, brought the technical expertise that would make engineers weep. These houses aren't just illegally positioned, he said, unrolling blueprints across my table. Foundation violations, electrical code violations, septic system encroachment. It's like a masterclass in how not to build houses. A strategy that emerged was poetry written in legalese and executed with military precision. Phase 1, Miranda would file criminal complaints with the state attorney general regarding Dale's bribery attempt and the systematic construction fraud. In layman's terms, recorded confession plus paper trail plus witness testimony equals politicians going to prison. Phase 2, formal cease and desist notices to every trespasser, backed by agricultural protection laws older than their grandparents. Any violation after official notice would trigger $500, 0 cents per incident fines, enough to make even trust fund babies reconsider their morning commute. Phase 3, county notification about illegal structures on public land, demanding either immediate demolition or market rate back rent. Translation, pay $189,000, 0 cents, or bulldoze your $1 million house. Their choice. Here's the beautiful irony, Marcus explained, sketching foundation diagrams with the enthusiasm of an artist. Once we trigger construction violation proceedings, their homeowner's insurance becomes void. No company insures illegally built structures. One kitchen fire and they're bankrupt. Tommy added the economic stranglehold. Every restaurant owner in 3 counties will be watching this precedent. If developers can harass farmers out of business, farm-to-table dining dies. The entire agricultural tourism industry rallies behind you. But Janet's historical research provided the nuclear option. Pinnacle Properties has run this exact scam in 4 other counties, she said, marking locations on a wall map with red pins like a detective tracking a serial killer. Same pattern. Build subdivision, manufacture easement disputes, pressure farmers to sell cheap. Class action lawsuit, Miranda declared immediately. We locate every affected farmer and file jointly. This stops being about your property and becomes about protecting agricultural heritage statewide. We spent 4 hours planning every detail, every contingency, every possible counterattack, the rhythmic scratch of pens on legal pads, the soft rustle of documents being organized into evidence folders, the quiet satisfaction of methodical preparation. It felt like mission planning in the Army, except this time I was fighting for my grandfather's legacy instead of corporate oil interests. The technical groundwork was extensive but elegantly simple. Professional soil remediation estimates, $4,200, 0 cents to repair tire damage. Comprehensive structural surveys of illegal construction, $8,500, 0 cents in code violations. Economic impact studies proving agriculture's importance to regional tourism. As my conspirators departed into the country darkness, their headlights disappearing down my legitimately legal access road, I felt the familiar calm that comes from superior planning, overwhelming evidence, and moral certainty. The sisters had been playing suburban politics while I was preparing total warfare. Tomorrow, their comfortable little world would start collapsing. You know what's beautiful about watching entitled people panic? They abandon all pretense of sophistication and reveal exactly who they really are. spoiled children with unlimited budgets, and zero impulse control. The Whitmore sisters' response to my legal blitzkrieg was a symphony of self-destruction that would have impressed Greek tragedy writers. Within 48 hours of Miranda's criminal complaints hitting the state attorney's desk, they hired a private investigator who was about as subtle as a marching band in a library. This guy, middle-aged, rental sedan, telephoto lenses, parked across from my farm like he was conducting surveillance on a terrorist cell instead of a veteran who grows heirloom tomatoes. I actually started leaving him bottles of water on hot days, professional courtesy from one working man to another. But the PI was just foreplay. The real show started when Veronica filed a police report claiming I'd made terroristic threats during a midnight phone call that existed only in her wine-soaked imagination. According to her sworn statement, I'd called her at 2 a.m. making violent agricultural threats about what happens to people who mess with farmers and their livestock. The creativity was Oscar-worthy. Apparently, I'd threatened to unleash my attack chickens on her BMW, because nothing says rural menace like weaponized poultry. Deputy Derek Lawson showed up at my door the next morning, his face carrying the kind of professional embarrassment that comes from investigating obviously fabricated crimes. "Ezra, I gotta follow up on this complaint," he said, the morning sun reflecting off his badge as bacon sizzled on my kitchen stove. "But your phone records show no outgoing calls to any Whitmore number, ever, and you were at the VFW poker game until 1 a.m. with 6 witnesses." The smell of coffee mixed with Derek's cologne as I handed him my phone logs. "False reports are a misdemeanor," he noted quietly, "just for future reference." Meanwhile, Beatrice was conducting her own campaign of bureaucratic terrorism. Anonymous tips flooded the health department about groundwater contamination from my organic operation, which was hilarious considering my farm had been featured in state agricultural magazines for sustainable practices, while their houses were built over illegally dumped construction debris. The health inspector, a nervous kid named Brad who kept apologizing while taking soil samples that would obviously test cleaner than most people's tap water, seemed genuinely confused about why he was investigating the county's most environmentally responsible farm. But the mini twist came when they escalated to actual sabotage. I woke up one morning to find my perimeter fence cut in 3 places, allowing my small herd of cattle to escape onto the county road. Not just damaged, professionally cut, with bolt cutters, creating gaps exactly wide enough for confused cows to wander through. Within an hour, Veronica appeared like a suburban vulture, filming the dangerous farm animals endangering public safety with her iPhone while her designer heels clicked against the asphalt. She'd clearly been waiting for this moment, probably parked around the corner with her camera ready. "This proves what we've been saying all along," she announced to her Facebook Live audience. "Irresponsible farming operations putting our families at risk." The performance was Academy Award material, except my security cameras had captured everything. At 2:17 a.m. a dark Range Rover, license plate matching Beatrice's vehicle, had crept along my fence line. The motion-activated floodlights revealed a figure in dark clothing, systematically cutting fence wire before disappearing into the pre-dawn darkness. Dr. Martinez, my veterinarian, confirmed what I already knew. These cuts were made with professional tools, not damaged by animals. This is deliberate vandalism designed to create a public safety incident. But Dale's desperation reached its crescendo that Thursday night at Miller's Diner. The phone call came while I was reviewing security footage. His voice carried the kind of panic usually reserved for emergency rooms and tax audits. "Ezra, we need to meet. Tonight. Miller's Diner, come alone." Miller's Diner squats on the county line like a truck stop from a noir film, the kind of place where conversations disappear into the clatter of cheap coffee cups and diesel exhaust, perfect for watching corrupt politicians self-destruct in real time. Dale was already there, hunched in a back booth like a man attending his own funeral. His usually pristine politician appearance had deteriorated into rumpled desperation, wrinkled suit, trembling hands, the sour smell of fear, sweat, mixing with burnt coffee. "You're destroying everything," he whispered, stirring sugar into coffee he'd never drink. "My career, my family's future, my wife's sanity." I slid across from him, my jacket pocket recording every word. "Your family destroyed themselves when they built those houses on stolen county land. That was Pinnacle's mistake, not ours. And the bribery, the threats, the fence cutting, also Pinnacle's mistakes?" His face crumpled like wet newspaper. Then he pulled out a manila folder containing contracts that would have made my grandfather roll over in his grave. $850,000, 0 cents, for your entire farm, he whispered. Agricultural to commercial development, shopping center, chain restaurants, maybe a hotel. You'd never have to work again. The folder contained preliminary agreements, architectural renderings, even a timeline for demolishing my grandfather's farmhouse. They'd been planning this for months. And if I refuse? Dale's mask finally disintegrated completely. Then you discover how many friends I have in county government, building inspectors, health departments, tax assessors. They all owe me favors. Your organic operation could face very thorough scrutiny. The beauty was that he'd just confessed to conspiracy, extortion, and corruption of public office into my digital recorder. I left him staring at his untouched coffee, probably calculating how his comfortable corruption had become a federal investigation. The cool night air carried the scent of approaching rain as thunder rumbled in the distance, like the sound of justice coming home. If you've ever wondered what happens when entitled suburbanites realize they're about to lose everything, let me paint you a picture. It gets ugly, fast, and the desperation makes people do things that would embarrass a reality TV show. The sisters' final gambit was a masterpiece of manufactured crisis that probably cost more than my annual farm income. They organized an emergency town hall about what they called agricultural terrorism, because apparently a veteran farmer defending his property rights was now equivalent to international threats. The county meeting room had been transformed into a suburban war room. Professional banners reading "Community Safety First" and "Protect Our Families" hung from the walls like campaign decorations. The air reeked of expensive perfume and the kind of self-righteous indignation that only comes from people who've never been told no in their entire privileged lives. Veronica had mobilized her real estate network like a general calling up reserves. The room was packed with faces I'd never seen, perfectly dressed warriors from subdivisions across 3 counties, all carrying matching signs that looked like they'd cost more to print than most people spend on groceries. But here's what made me smile in the back of that room. I wasn't there to defend myself anymore. I was there to watch them destroy themselves on public record. Beatrice opened with a PowerPoint presentation that would have impressed Fortune 500 executives, pie charts about agricultural violence, traffic flow studies, even a timeline of my supposed escalating threats that read like a conspiracy theorist's fever dream. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, clicking to a slide showing a photoshopped image of my farm equipment looming menacingly over a school bus, "we're dealing with a dangerous individual who uses farming as a cover for intimidation and harassment." The crowd murmured approval like a trained audience at a talk show taping. Veronica followed with her greatest performance yet. Tears streaming down her Botoxed cheeks, she described the terror of living next to someone who monitored their movements and threatened their children's safety. According to her testimony, I was basically a rural Taliban operative using organic vegetables as weapons of mass destruction. "This isn't about property rights," she sobbed into the microphone. "This is about a disturbed individual who can't accept that our community is moving into the modern era." The acting was so over the top that I almost applauded. But the real piece de resistance came when Dale stood up to propose using eminent domain to seize my road for public safety purposes. The irony of a corrupt politician trying to steal land to cover up his own crimes was so perfect it felt scripted. "Sometimes," he declared with the kind of manufactured gravitas that politicians practice in mirrors, "individual property rights must yield to community safety. We cannot allow one person's agricultural extremism to endanger innocent families." That's when the mini-twist revealed itself in all its beautiful stupidity. 3 concerned residents testified about the dangers of living near my farm, heart-wrenching stories about children afraid to play outside, property values plummeting, the constant fear of agricultural retaliation. The performances were so coordinated, they could have been choreographed. Except, I'd already run background checks on every speaker. Concerned resident number 1, Margaret Hoffman, who claimed to live directly adjacent to my farm and fear for her grandchildren's safety. Except, Margaret lived in Roanoke, 40 miles away, and had never set foot in our county. Worried neighbor number 2, David Patterson, who tearfully described the trauma of living with constant agricultural harassment. David's address? A Baltimore apartment building. His connection to our community? He was Veronica's cousin's ex-husband. The third terrified local was actually an actor from Richmond who'd appeared in dinner theater productions and apparently needed the money. They'd literally hired professional liars to perform at a government meeting. When County Commissioner Janet Powell asked if I wanted to respond, I stood, slowly, letting the silence build like thunder before a storm. Thank you, Commissioner Powell. I appreciate everyone's creative testimony tonight. The emphasis on creative landed like a slap. I could see Veronica's face tighten as she realized I wasn't going to explode into defensive anger. I'll be submitting my formal response through proper legal channels within 24 hours, along with documentation regarding tonight's proceeding. I held up a manila folder thick enough to choke a horse, then smiled the kind of cold smile that comes from holding all the winning cards. However, I would like to thank tonight's speakers for their enthusiasm, especially those who traveled such long distances to share their concerns about our local community. The confusion spreading across the room was beautiful. Veronica's perfect composure cracked like ice in spring. Dale looked like he'd swallowed a live toad. Even their hired actors started fidgeting nervously. Any questions about my response will be addressed through my legal counsel. Good evening. I walked out of that meeting room like a general leaving a conquered battlefield, my boots echoing in the sudden silence. Behind me, I could hear frantic whispered conversations and the rustling of panicked text messages being sent. They just committed perjury, fraud, and conspiracy at a public government meeting, all while being recorded by multiple cameras. The cool night air tasted like victory as I drove home past fields that would never again be scarred by the tires of entitled trespassers. Tomorrow, their comfortable world of suburban privilege would begin its final collapse. And I'd have front row seats to watch justice being served. You know that moment in a movie when the hero finally gets to reveal all the villain's crimes in front of everyone who matters? That moment when justice isn't just served, but served with a side of public humiliation that makes the audience cheer? Well, buckle up, because real life just delivered that moment in spectacular fashion. The emergency county meeting Dale had called for the following Tuesday was supposed to be my public execution. They'd packed the room with even more imported supporters, brought in a local TV news crew, and even managed to get sheriff's deputies present for public safety. The air was thick with anticipation, and the kind of expensive cologne that screams, "I'm important and you're not." County Attorney Michael Harrison was there, looking uncomfortable in his wrinkled suit. State Agricultural Inspector Lisa Morgan had driven down from Richmond. Even an FBI agent, Special Agent Sarah Mitchell, sat quietly in the back, her presence as ominous as storm clouds on a clear day. Veronica opened with a performance that would have won her an Emmy for Best Dramatic Overacting. Dressed in widow's black like she was mourning the death of suburban safety, she approached the podium with the kind of theatrical gravity usually reserved for declaring war. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here tonight to protect our community from an escalating pattern of agricultural terrorism, she began, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. This man has threatened our families, destroyed our peace of mind, and turned our neighborhood into a war zone. The crowd of imported supporters nodded like synchronized swimmers. Dale followed with his proposal to declare my farm a public nuisance and authorize immediate eminent domain seizure for community protection. The vote, he announced with the confidence of a man who thought he'd already won, would happen tonight. Sometimes, he declared, gesturing toward the television camera, like a politician addressing the nation. Individual property rights must yield to the greater good. We cannot allow one person's extremism to hold an entire community hostage. The applause from his hired audience was thunderous. Then it was my turn. I approached the podium carrying a briefcase that looked heavy enough to contain the collected works of Shakespeare. The room fell silent except for the hum of recording equipment and the nervous shuffling of feet. Thank you, Mr. Whitmore, for that enlightening presentation. I opened the briefcase and pulled out a thick manila folder, setting it on the podium with a satisfying thud that echoed through the suddenly quiet room. Before we discuss eminent domain, I'd like to share some interesting discoveries about this case. I pulled out my phone and connected it to the room's speaker system. This is a recording of a phone conversation from last Thursday evening. Dale's voice filled the room with crystal clarity. What if I told you there was a way to make this all go away? A development deal that would make you rich. Really rich. The gasps were audible. Dale's face went from confident politician to trapped animal in about 3 seconds. But I wasn't done, not even close. This next recording is from our meeting at Miller's Diner. Dale's desperate voice echoed through the speakers. Then you'll find out how many friends I have in county government. Building inspectors, health departments, tax assessors, they all owe me favors. The silence was so complete, you could have heard a pin drop in the parking lot. Now, let's discuss property rights, I said, pulling out Thompson's survey documents. According to county records, the road in question was deeded in 1958 with a very specific restriction: agricultural vehicles only, in perpetuity. I held up the faded blueprint so the TV camera could capture it clearly. Any change requires unanimous consent of all adjoining agricultural property owners. That means me. Veronica tried to interrupt, but I was just getting started. More interesting is what we discovered about Meadowbrook Estates construction. I spread out Thompson's detailed survey results. 3 houses in the subdivision, including both Whitmore properties, were built with foundations extending 8 to 12 feet into county road right-of-way. County Attorney Harrison sat up straighter, his legal mind already calculating the implications. These structures were built without permits, without easements, and without legal authority. They're technically constructed on stolen public land. The murmur from the crowd was like distant thunder. But the mic drop moment came when I addressed the audience directly. I'd also like to thank last week's speakers for their passionate testimony, especially Margaret Hoffman, who traveled all the way from Roanoke to express her concerns about living adjacent to my farm. I held up printed driving directions showing the 40-mile distance, and David Patterson, who flew in from Baltimore to share his experiences as my terrified neighbor. The TV camera swung to capture Dale's face, which had gone from politician white to heart attack gray. The third speaker was professional actor James Morrison, whose headshots are available on Richmond Theater's website. Agent Mitchell was taking notes now, her pen moving across the pad like she was writing arrest warrants. Ladies and gentlemen, what you witnessed last week wasn't community concern. It was perjury, fraud, and conspiracy committed at a public government meeting. The room erupted. Reporters started shouting questions. Dale tried to slip toward the exit but found his path blocked by deputies who were suddenly very interested in his location. Veronica stood frozen at her table like a deer caught in headlights, her perfect suburban composure crumbling in real time. "Any questions about my property rights," I said into the microphone as chaos erupted around me, "can be directed to my attorney. This meeting is adjourned." As I packed my evidence back into the briefcase, the sweet taste of justice filled my mouth like honey. 3 years of harassment, threats, and intimidation had just collapsed into criminal charges and federal investigations. The nightmare was over. The reckoning had begun. 6 months later, the morning air on my farm smells exactly like it should: fresh soil, growing herbs, and the complete absence of luxury car exhaust. The sound of my grandfather's wind chimes carries across fields that will never again be scarred by entitled trespassers. And brother, that's a beautiful thing. Justice, as it turns out, has a domino effect that's more satisfying than any revenge fantasy. Dale Whitmore resigned from the city council 3 days after our public meeting, right before the FBI arrested him for bribery, extortion, and conspiracy. His mugshot, complete with that deer-in-headlights expression, made the front page of every newspaper in Virginia. Last I heard, he was working at a car dealership in West Virginia, which seems fitting for someone who specialized in selling people things they couldn't afford. Veronica lost her real estate license pending a state investigation into fraudulent property transactions. Turns out, when you're caught lying at government meetings, the real estate board gets very interested in reviewing your entire career. She's currently working at a call center, which gives her plenty of practice apologizing to people she's wronged. Beatrice got transferred to her insurance company's Anchorage office. Apparently, corporate headquarters decided she needed to experience what real harassment feels like by dealing with Alaskan fishing boat claims in February. The irony is delicious. But the legal resolution was even sweeter than their personal downfalls. The court ruled definitively that my road access was agricultural only, enforceable with $500.00 fines per violation. More importantly, Judge Patricia Williams set a statewide precedent protecting agricultural easements from residential encroachment, citing the Dalton decision as a landmark case for farming rights. Sisters were ordered to pay $18,500, 0 cents in documented trespassing damages plus legal fees that topped $30,000, 0 cents. But here's the beautiful part. Pinnacle Properties faced a class action lawsuit from farmers across 4 counties who'd suffered similar harassment. The company settled for $2,300,000, 0 cents, and agreed to stop their land grab operations entirely. Those 3 illegally built houses? The county gave the owners 60 days to either pay $187,000, 0 cents in back rent for occupying public land or demolish the encroaching portions. 2 families chose demolition. The third, ironically, Beatrice's house, was foreclosed when the owners couldn't afford the legal fees and fines. The community healing that followed was like watching a neighborhood remember what it used to be. Meadowbrook Estates residents, freed from the sisters' toxic influence, organized a Neighbor Appreciation Day that brought together farmers and suburbanites for the first time in years. The smell of barbecue mixed with fresh corn from my fields, as kids who'd never seen vegetables growing in soil marveled at my tomato plants. Local restaurants expanded their farm-to-table partnerships, creating stable income for area farmers and turning our county into a legitimate agritourism destination. The Whitmore scandal, as local papers called it, actually increased property values by establishing our area as a place that protects agricultural heritage over corporate development. But the initiative I'm most proud of is the Seeds of Service program we established with the settlement money. Working with the Agricultural Extension Office, we created a nonprofit that provides free land leases and training to military veterans interested in farming. So far, we've helped 12 former servicemen and women establish sustainable operations on reclaimed agricultural land. The program includes partnerships with state universities for modern farming education and guaranteed restaurant contracts for their produce. The scholarship fund we created provides full college tuition for rural students pursuing agricultural careers, because the best way to protect farming is to ensure the next generation understands its value. We've awarded 6 scholarships so far, including one to a young woman whose family farm was almost lost to similar development pressure. Every morning, when I walk through my herb garden, now expanded to include the land where luxury cars used to tear through my crops, I can hear the satisfied clucking of chickens, the gentle hum of beehives, and the distant sound of other veterans learning to grow food instead of destroy things. The county created an agricultural ombudsman position to prevent future harassment of farmers, funded new legal aid programs for rural property owners, and passed ordinances protecting agricultural operations from nuisance complaints. We turned our local victory into systemic change that will protect farmers for generations. As I sit on my porch this evening, watching fireflies dance over fields that smell like summer and growth and home, I realize something my grandfather always knew. Good land outlasts bad people, and patience defeats aggression every single time. Got your own HOA horror story? Share it in the comments below. I guarantee you're not alone in dealing with entitled neighbors who think rules don't apply to them. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about standing up to people who mistake their money for actual power. Because sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to be pushed around.